make sure that we're recording our meeting tonight. Again, welcome everyone. I'm really glad that you all are here. This is the Brains and Brawn info session on the FAFSA. So we appreciate you coming to this meeting tonight. Again, this is one that's probably a good idea for you to get a piece of paper in case questions come up that you think of that you'd like to ask at the end. Amy's ready. I'm sure that some of you with cameras off are also ready. You grab your pen and paper because yeah, you might have something that comes up and you don't want to forget to ask. But luckily, Mark Wilson is always very available to answer questions, whether we're in a Zoom or not. Without further ado, I'll let Mark take over to talk to us about the FAFSA stuff.
Thank you, Leah. So good evening, everybody. I hope everyone's doing okay. Today will be a little bit of an integration between the financing college discussion that we had last time, but with a little bit more specifics focused on the FAFSA. I put my email just now into the chat, so if you don't have that already down, be sure you do write it down. The FAFSA, I want to preface with everyone's financial situation is unique to them, and there are other financial documents, the CSS and the Idoc, that may be required by the institutions that you're applying to. If that's the case, you need to make sure that you're doing a little bit of research into what the actual requirements are for your school, and you're preparing and getting your past tax returns and everything else ready to go for that. But if you have questions specific to your own financial situation, your families, or however that might be set up, email me. We'll hop on a call. I'll do a Zoom chat with just you, myself, and whoever else is involved in financing your kids' education, because these things are very important, but they're also very nuanced. So like student to student, family to family, they can be very unique. And it also changes things based off of which colleges you're applying to, whether you're self-employed, whether you have a 529, or whether you're paying out of pocket. How you're trying to afford college is unique to you. So a lot of the information I'm going to cover today will be a bit more general than specific, because I feel that that's best. So go ahead and start sharing my screen. If you have questions that pop up along the way, feel free to put them into the chat so that we can address them as they come up. And I'm going to turn my video off if I can in just a second, maybe, because I don't want this to bog down my computer. So we did go through this quite a bit earlier in the year, but if you weren't there, this is a good refresher. And if you want to go back and watch that video, I strongly encourage doing that. Ms. Keys did record that, so you can reach out to her for the link, okay? So in general, we're just going to start out with a basic overview of financial aid. Terminologies differ school to school, but basically this is tuitions, fees, room and board, books, supplies, transportation. It's how you pay for all of those things, okay? And the basic ways that we typically see to do that are through grants, scholarships, loans that are either federal or private, and work study opportunities and other programs. So looking at all of those, in general, we want to start out really focusing on grants and scholarships, because those are things you're not going to have to pay back. The loans, especially on the private end, can be pretty difficult to get paid back. The interest rates are climbing. And work study programs are fine, and they're great options for some students, but they do demand time that the student may have to dedicate to studying and other things. So I'd be looking out for those as an option to supplement, but it's going to be really difficult to pay for a college tuition through a work study program where you're working typically no more than 19 hours a week is the typical cap. So how does financial aid work? There is federal financial aid that you typically have to go through a series of questions to figure out how much of that you will be eligible for, okay? Then there are also school-specific scholarships. Typically, those require, if you're applying to a public institution, they require that you apply early. So if you have not started your college application already, I strongly advise you do so. Meet with your next step coach. Make sure that you're in before any deadlines so that you can be eligible for any kind of merit-based scholarships that schools, especially public schools, may provide. And occasionally, we'll dive into this a lot more here in just a second, there are additional applications such as the CSS or the Idoc, that's IDOC, but pronounced Idoc, that you will do as well. The FAFSA, though, the one we're going to be most specific on today, is required for every single kid who wants to go into college in America. And you have to do it every year. So it's kind of like filing your taxes. If you have kids in college, you're going to hate it, and you're going to hate it every year. But you have to do it, okay? It's extremely important. The FAFSA is available. It's free. You use the Department of Education's website to find it, and it opens up on October 1st. So the timing here is no coincidence. We are trying to get this out ahead of the actual opening of this. Now, the general deadline for FAFSA is June 30th, but I want people to understand that that is the general deadline through the Department of Education. Most schools have deadlines far earlier than June 30th. You need to look at your school and how you will be applying before that. Mr. Judican, I saw your question. Should you already be submitting applications to schools? That's a great question. If you are looking to apply early to institutions and you have a deadline of November 1st, you can go ahead and apply. If you're looking at schools that have rolling admissions, especially, rolling admissions are ones that fill based off of the number of seats with no actual deadline. And a great example of that that's close to home is Harding University in Arkansas for most of you guys. That is one where they have a limited number of seats and it's on a first come, first served basis based off their competitiveness. But if you're just going for general deadlines, the December 31st is your regular decision deadline. The big interest there in applying early is to be eligible for merit aid, okay? And you need to refer back to our other presentation on the difference in early decision and early action if you're not familiar with those terminologies, because early decision is a binding decision. Early action is essentially an acceptance that you have until May 1st. You can make whatever decisions you want with it. Generally, acceptance rates are pretty substantially different between early and regular. So hope that answers your question. If not, you can reach out through the chat again and I'll try my best to go back to that. Anyway, back to the FAFSA here. This deadline here is the one that is the last possible deadline. Your school is almost always going to require your information to be in far earlier than that, typically very early in the spring. So let's go through some basic steps to getting started on the FAFSA. And there are some typos here and some other things you should know that are important, okay? So first, to start out, you're going to get your FSA ID, okay? The FSA ID is unique to the student and the parent, okay? So you will have your own login if you are a student, and then if you are the parent or legal guardian, okay? Do not use the same FSA ID. You are considered two mutually exclusive parties. It is extremely important. There are tools, specifically there's one called the Save Key, the Save tool, that allows you to transfer back and forth. So if Jonathan and Julie are transferring this back and forth to each other, he's putting in his information and she's putting in the school she wants to apply to, they can use that Save Key to kind of bump information between the two of them. That is good. Do not use the same FSA ID. Gather your necessary documents, okay? So get everything together, go through your old desk drawer and find those old tax returns. It's going to be important. If you have anything out there like 529s or anything else that you're using to pay for school, definitely look at that. And I strongly advise you to use the IRS data retrieval tool. It saves you a ton of time in the actual process of putting in line items from your tax return, okay? If you do any tax returns at the end of the year, which I would imagine you do, then this will it's a huge luxury to be able to expedite your time, okay? And then this is something that the student will be doing here. How many years of tax returns? They're gonna be looking at 2020 there, Mr. Duke. So it'll be last year's. And list your colleges that you wanna apply. You will be able to enter up to 10 schools here. You can update this. So like if your plans are going to change between now and December 31st, not a problem at all. Go ahead and start. Don't wait till you figure out which schools you're going to apply to for the regular decision. I'll go ahead and start this process just in case you run into any hiccups. Here, I want to be very specific. Okay, there are 5,300 post-secondary institutions in America out there. And ironically, some of them share very similar names, okay? It happens to me every single year where some of my one-on-one clients call me up and say, hey man, the University of Tennessee is saying they didn't get my tax return and they didn't get my FAFSA. Okay, well, let's look at things. And when I dive in, they didn't apply to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. They applied to the University of Tennessee at Martin or Chattanooga. Had a girl last year who thought she applied to Columbia University and she applied to Columbia College. Had a kid last year think they applied to Amherst College and they applied to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. you read this stuff carefully. It's extremely important, and mistakes are easy to make, and they're often hard to fix. All right, so make sure you read very closely. Look at the state that it says the school's in. All right, if it's not the state that you think the school's supposed to be in, then you probably want to give it a second look. Let's look at the Fafsa checklist. Here's a quick list of things that you need, and Mr. Judican, this should answer some of your questions. So you're going to want Social Security card, driver's license, you have one, W-2 forms, federal income tax return. Now, keep in mind, like I said, the IRS data retrieval tool will expedite some of this. Parents' W-2 forms, parents' federal tax return, bank statements, untaxed income records, and current businesses and investment records if there are anything out there. So keep in mind, this here is addressed at the student. This is addressed at the parent or parents or guardians, all right? So let's look at some important things here. This form is used to determine a family's expected, so their EFC, their expected financial contribution. That's what you can realistically pay. It's also what they use to determine your subsidized and unsubsidized federal student loans. Asks a lot of questions about your assets, student income, student assets. If you have things out there that might be a little unique, like 529s or anything like that, might come into play. It also takes into account other kids. So if you've got another kid that is in college, when my brother started college, he was the only one. He's older than me. When I went to college, we were both in college at the same school at the same time. So that helped out a little bit because it looks a little different on our parents. And then when my little sister was in college, there again, it helped out even more. So that could be very impactful. Household, make sure you have a good, accurate reflection there, just like with your tax returns, okay? There's a difference in filing a single, filing jointly. So make sure that you look at all of those details. Okay, that's where we're going to stop on just general FAFSA information, because most of that is going to be unique to the individual, but those are informational. You need to have all of those documents ready to go and make sure that you are looking at all of that stuff. The biggest thing you can be doing right now over the next few days before October 1st is to find all of this stuff. If you don't have it, if you're like me and you have it thrown into the back of a closet somewhere because you don't want to lose it, but at the same time, you don't want to look at your tax returns every day, you're going to probably need to dig this out, okay? If you have any money out there in different places, you're probably going to want to get logins, reset your password to your old Charles Schwab 401k, whatever might be out there if you've got stuff hidden away. So you are ready to go. But other than that, it is pretty straightforward. And they do a lot of educational videos on the actual FAFSA, the Federal Student Aid website through the Department of Education. The biggest thing is that some of the things you do are very difficult to undo. So like I said, if you put in the wrong college, make sure you're reading it very closely, okay? If you've got 10 schools you can send it to, and you send it to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst instead of Amherst College, that's one of your 10 schools. You're not going to be able to send it to, 10 other schools. Good question, Mr. Judican. The FAFSA, so you do have your own unique login. Your FSA ID is unique to the student. If the student held a job, gained any income that was enough to substantiate filing a tax return, then they will have their own unique information. But generally, the family, for most students, it's only the family income information. That's there again, another reason that it is important to look at it at a specific to you situation, because like my kid held a summer job and they filed a tax return. My kid held a summer job and only made $500. My kid didn't hold any job. So this does not necessarily mean that your students or your children have all access to all of your financial information. And I would say that in general, most teens are not going to really understand or care that much about the line item details of a tax return in the first place, but they won't see everything necessarily. You do have to fill out the FAFSA every single year that they're in college. So my parents at least really wanted me to know how to do this so that they didn't have to, because there's no internet in the town that I grew up in. So for me, it was very imperative that I did understand how to do this kind of stuff. It might save you guys a little headache in the future if your kids can at least put in their basic information, because as they start to get into college and they are holding internships and summer jobs, and it is good for them to know. Now, are they going to need to know about your Roth IRA and things like that? No, but it is helpful for them to know the basics of this stuff, in my opinion. But that's just, I don't have kids either, so there you go. Important notes on the FAFSA, we've gone through that. Now we're going to dive into the CSS here. This is typically used for private colleges, but I know that a lot of students at Crosstown have private colleges on their radar. It's supplemental, okay? You still have to do the FAFSA. if you're going to go to college, there's no way out of the FAFSA. This is determining how these schools give out their own financial aid funds. So schools that offer need-based financial aid, grants, merit scholarships, they'll often ask for this. It's similar to the FAFSA in a lot of ways. Sometimes they'll ask for other things. Like you might look a little different on paper. For instance, if you are self-employed, it might change how one of the documents perceives the net worth of your company. If your company has no capital, in terms of capital raised and considered by the IRS, they only consider physical capital. So like Brains and Brawn, for instance, doesn't have as much physical capital. So that would look differently on the FAFSA and the CSS. If you're a lawyer, for instance, most of the capital you have is intellectual and probably not a ton of like equipment, right? So those kind of things can change what it might look like. So just be sure that when you get the CSS request, you're looking at it. These often end up in spam folders. That's the most common thing I see, is you'll get an email requesting the CSS and you won't see it. You have to pay for this, $25. It's not free like the FAFSA. And then every additional report, $16, okay? You can go to the College Board website. If you notice, the College Board, they kind of monopolize a lot of the things in college. So you've got the PSAT, SAT, APs, but you also have the CSS. So go through, and if you're interested, if you have private schools on the radar, you can go look. But at the same time, they will let you know that you have to fill this out. Just like with the Common App and the actual application deadlines, there are deadlines for this stuff. It's pretty flexible, but especially if you're in a unique situation where you think uncovering this information might be difficult, like if you're not living with your birth parents or if your parents are separated but contributing, it is important to go ahead and put out some communications to try to make sure that you're all set on that, okay? Because it can be a little. So we'll move in really quickly to the Idoc, another College Board document here, Institutional Documentational Service. This one is probably the least common. There's another typo. Whoops. It allows for secure electronic upload, transmission, and submission of all financial documents. This is a portal directly through the school site. So it just basically changes the methodology that the school uses to attain your financial records, but it's not dramatically different than the CSS in that regard. It's just essentially a different methodology for submitting a lot of the same stuff. Very rarely do I see students who have to do the Idoc and CSS. It's typically kids who are applying to too many schools, like 15 schools. You're probably only going to have to do the FAFSA and maybe the Idoc or the CSS. But again, just make sure that you're on top of it. And by the time you get to the Idoc, if you've already completed the FAFSA and CSS, you'll be a pro at this, especially if you already have kids in college. If you already have kids in college, I will tell you that this will be the best year in terms of any kind of federal aid. If you are ever going to be eligible for it, the more kids you have in college, the better. So a little silver lining there to having 2 or more kids that are costing you college tuition every year is that they might be costing you less per kid. Okay, so come back to this really. Go through this pretty quickly. If you want to look more at this, Ms. Keys can share you the financing for college, where I really dive into like subsidized versus unsubsidized federal student loans and what all of those look like, what the difference is in those versus private student loans that are not necessarily tied to the cost of the college in every situation, and just general information on how the interest rates tend to vary pretty widely between those, and how they are, prioritized from my end, in my like economics mindset, how you should start the search in a way that allows you to not be head over heels in debt when you graduate, okay? Federal student loans. So these are fixed interest rate loans, especially right now. You can have pretty long deferment periods. There are 2 types here, generally subsidized and unsubsidized federal student loans. When you're looking at these, the interest rates and who pays that interest while you're in college is different between the federal subsidized and unsubsidized student loans. So go back, please refer back to that Financing College presentation if you have not seen it. With this, the FAFSA is paramount for this, okay? Federal grants are not repaid, which is very helpful, okay? I always encourage kids to look at things like this. And work study, So this is part-time work. There's always an hourly cap on the work. There's usually, though, a fairly generous minimum wage on these college campuses compared to the actual state's requisite minimum wage that you might see. So, like, for instance, I had jobs that were very low impact, working in a library, making sure kids check books back in, working at a gym, handing people towels when they walked in, and I was making like $15 an hour doing that. And I could do my homework the entire time while I was sitting there at the desk. Those are not rare at colleges. So those kind of jobs can help out a little bit, but it, usually with a 19-hour cap, you're not gonna be able to pay your undergrad tuition through this. So it's a nice way to supplement a little bit, save mom and dad some of the basic living expenses, and maybe help you save up and buy a new laptop if you need one every year, buy your textbooks, but you're not gonna be able to pay the, 50 grand a year that it might cost to go to the school. So just keep that in mind, okay? The federal loans here, and oftentimes, so that's all going to be contingent on your FAFSA, all right? And oftentimes, work study opportunities at certain schools are prioritized based off of need. So make sure you accurately reflect all of that, okay? What are your deadlines here? So it's important for you guys to meet these deadlines. They do vary by institution. Remember that I said June 30th was the deadline for the FAFSA that's recognized nationally. That is not going to be the case for 99% of your schools. The only time I've ever seen an actual June 30th deadline is for rolling admission schools, such as that Harding University that I mentioned earlier, which I don't know about this year, but like before you could apply, 2 weeks before class started. And since it's rolling admission, if they still have seats open, okay? CSS is also available on October 1st. There again, deadline varies by school. What I would encourage each of you to do is figure out your timeline, first and foremost, for how you will be applying. Am I applying early here? Okay, those deadlines are going to be a little different potentially. Then go look at the ones that you are applying early for, if you have any early applications out there. After that, look at your regular decision applications or rolling admission applications like University of Harding or University of Pittsburgh, and figure out what your timeline looks like for all of this. Now, the nice thing is that you can knock out the FAFSA for all of these schools in one singular completion of the FAFSA, okay? You don't have, if you're applying to 10 schools versus 4 schools, you don't have to more than double the work, okay? You do have to put those schools in so that they do receive a copy of your information, but it's not akin to doing supplemental essays where you have to write essays for every school that require them that are unique. The FAFSA is one singular portal. CSS is similar to that, and Idoc is similar to that as well. They're more rare, so you probably won't have to do them at all. But in general, the most important thing for you to be doing right now is finding those old tax returns, finding all that information. And the next most important thing is to be creating a calendar with deadlines, okay? And putting reminders in your phone, putting reminders in your Google Calendar, your Outlook for these deadlines so that you can start. If you have questions once you start this, I really want you to try to go through it first on your own, because honestly, a lot of this stuff can be solved through the IRS data retrieval tool, especially if you can't find stuff. But if you have questions after you look at this, email me and I will either send you over the answer if it's a simple one. And if we need to walk through things, if you have a unique situation, which happens, like parents are separated or living in different states and it's difficult to get, that kind of stuff can conflate the issue a little bit more. I'll help you with that. Okay, we can talk through how to find the solution, what actual information needs to go into this, who is considered the legal guardian, however that might be viewed by the college and the institution. Time is your friend. Like I say every time, time is your friend when you have plenty of it. It's your worst enemy when you're running out of it, right? So you have time now. Go through the closet this weekend, find the old tax returns, get all that stuff together, log into your 401k, IRA, 529, whatever you got, do all that stuff, look up your car payments, however much financial overhang you have, go look at it all, make sure you have it all ready to go. It'd be better to go through it and have it all ready to go versus having to time out your FAFSA 15 times because you didn't have enough information. You're in the closet digging through that stuff and the document times out, okay? This is a frustrating thing. It's very similar to filing your taxes every year, and it's not something that you can necessarily do in 30 minutes. but it's also not something that you have to be a rocket scientist to complete. Now, if you have a unique situation, please reach out to me and I will help you out. And I want to open up the floor for questions now. And then I want to dive into a general overview after that of scholarships. I feel like they're mutually exclusive and we should definitely try to focus on one and then the other. Anyone with questions, feel free to just take yourself off mute and do my best to answer it or get back to you.
Hey, Mark, thanks. This is so helpful. You mentioned a bunch of things right at the end there that are not included on the slide that I now have a wonderful picture of in terms of getting everything ready. So like, for example, whether or not we may have some money put away for college and that kind of thing, like in certain accounts, that's not on this list of FAFSA stuff. So where is like the complete list of everything that we're going to need to fill the FAFSA out?
Yeah, so that's one of those where like the complete list would, and I spoke with Ms. Keys before putting this together because I was worried that like our list could become so long that it, doesn't really have value for anyone. Like, I could spend a lot of time talking about 529s, but most people in reality don't have 529s, set up for kids. So the complete list, you can go through the FAFSA you can go through the FAFSA checklist there on the Federal Student Aid Department of Education site. It is extremely contingent on like your own financial situation and, the mortgage, your second mortgage, maybe that's not applicable to you. Do you have another home in Florida? Okay, well, maybe that's not applicable to you. So just in the interest of time, Mr. Judic and I decided to resend that information and just like try to focus on the high points. When you're going through this though, in general, it's going to be looking at the same things that a tax return would be looking at. Okay, so like, in general, they're looking for your debt to equity ratios and trying to figure out like, what your ability to contribute, your expected financial income can actually be. If you have an anomalous thing that you're thinking of, especially with money set aside for kids that you have specifically for college, that will be considered. So if you have specific questions on that, definitely send them over to me for you or for anyone else who has those. But for me to say like, here's everything on there, I could spend an hour just talking about all the different things that may or may not be considered, especially when it gets into unique family situations.
Sorry, and then like the most basic question, the FAFSA form is found the same place that the Common App is? Are they in the same place or like where do we go to?
Yeah,
where do we go to fill out the FAFSA? Just Google FAFSA?
Yes, yeah, if you go to FAFSA, I think it's fafsa.gov, fafsa.gov. Yeah, and it'll pop up. If you type in fafsa.gov, it'll go to studentaid.gov/apply for aid. It's not the Common App. It is through the Department of Education. And I'll go back and share my screen right here, just so I can show everyone what it looks like. So, I mean, it's meant to be very user-friendly. And you do the FAFSA, start here. Returning user, which is what you'll be after you create your FSA ID, which is unique to you. And there will be one unique to Julia in your situation and for everyone else to their own child. Go ahead and start, okay? And you can go through, they do have plenty of little helpful like things to understand the differences here. Now, granted, I cover most of this, but like when you start looking through stuff, it's kind of a smart application. So it'll ask you, for instance, it might ask you if you have a 529 and it's going to ask you information about it. But if you click that you don't have a 529, they're not going to need to know anything about it. So like that kind of stuff will be a logic-based system. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, I have a question too. So the early application deadline you said is November 1st. Is that correct?
That's the general deadline for most schools. That can also be a little confusing because there's early 1, early 2 at some schools, but generally.
Okay. And then what are going on this next round of ACT and SAT scores to come in? So you happen to
September
know
11th
if they'll
test?
be in?
The September 11th test results were today. They were
Okay.
released today.
Well, the ones that are coming up,
Mhm.
I think there's some in October, and I don't have the dates right now.
Yes, ma'am.
But we
There's
need that for the application, right? We need their.
Yes, for most schools, the October 2nd and October 23rd, which are the 2 test dates that I believe you're referring to, plus the one that Crosstown's hosting, which Ms. Keys, is that October 19th?
It's actually on Tuesday, October 5th. That's when we
Okay.
will be hosting the ACT for our seniors.
So those dates should all be fine for most colleges. I would there again just go make sure that like your specific institution will be okay with those dates. Certain times schools, if it's a late date that's pressing the October 23rd date, where ostensibly you'll get your results like the first week of November, which is obviously after the deadline. Sometimes you can retroactively send them in and just make sure that you do put in the school that you are applying early to. But there again, I would make sure I read the deadlines. 99% of those schools are going to be okay with October 1st, the 5th, and probably the 23rd. They're running on the ACT, they're running a current 10-day lag, which is incredibly fast for them. During COVID, it was like months. So 10 days for them is incredible. I would make sure that I look at my specific school though.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yes, and I see a question here in the chat. If we have a Fafsa ID for our older child, do we log in with that? Yes, so you continue to use your own unique login, but for you, Lauren, Malcolm will have his own, and then you'll have your own that you continue to use. And you guys will have your own, yes, and you'll have your own save key that is unique to like that integration. Malcolm, Lauren, and then whoever your other son or daughter may be will have their own thing so that you're able to basically like, okay, I've done my job, punt it over to Malcolm so you can put in his colleges. He says, okay, I'm done. And then he puts that back to you and you guys will be able to continue to update the same overall FAFSA profile through, the same portal without using the same login. You'll have your own unique login. Is there other?
Mark, sorry, thanks. I have an additional question. So with our older son, he hopefully is wrapping up his senior year of college. We didn't continue to fill out the FAFSA every year that he was there because we filled it out in case he went to a state school, a Tennessee school, so that he would get the Tennessee scholarship money, but he didn't go, and there was really no reason for us to continue updating it year after year. So when we go in and log into that one from 4 years ago, it's still the same account, and then we just add Malcolm into it? Is that right?
To be honest with you, it might be a bit better for us to hop on another call because I'm very unsure how you were able to circumvent doing that at all. So I would need to know a little bit more information about like the institution that he was at, because typically you have to fill it out every year. And with 4 years of lag, I'm not sure if the account would be active. You may have to go through the old password retrieval, or you may have to contact them. It sounds like you guys are in a unique situation where it's not a public or private school that I'm aware of. So it'd probably be better to just help me understand a little more on that. I'm just a little confused. I don't want to mislead you or anything.
No, that's all right. And I don't want to take everybody else's up time. So I'll just check in with it and I'll get back to you.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Anyone else have questions? I want to make sure that like paying for college is definitely the scariest part of it, right? So if y'all have questions, please ask, because this stuff has deadlines and it's incredibly costly, right? So
I've already asked a lot of questions, so I'm hoping that they're relevant for other people, but here's another one. So when you flashed, like when you shared your screen and went to that financial aid site, the federal student aid site, that looked very familiar to me because I have student loans, student debt that I'm still paying off.
Mhm.
So now, does that mean that I already have a FAFSA ID and I now just need to go back into my account, or is this a whole new thing? I don't know now.
That is an excellent question, Mr. Judican. And although you don't look a day over 20, I would imagine that you are if you have a kid who's applying to college. So I'm not sure what the portal was a few years ago. I don't know if you used the FAFSA for where you went to school. And that is honestly just outside of my wheelhouse in terms of expertise. I would imagine that if you went to college in like the 90s, early 2000s, that there was more of kind of like the college application process at that time, more of a paper-based system. There again, I feel grossly underprepared to answer that question because I do not know about the FAFSA circa before 2010, honestly. They will have some sort of record of it, but I don't know if it'll be digitized in the format where you can log in. That would be a question that I would need to get back to you on.
Sorry, but permit me to, because other people really may be in this situation. I log on to that site that you went to every year because I have student loans and I need to submit forms and all of that through that specific site. But I don't know whether that's the same thing as having a, what's it called? The Fafsa ID?
Yeah, if you're using that, then you have an FSA ID. Yes. I thought you were saying, is it going to recognize you as a student because at one point you were a student? And I was, okay. So yeah, you should definitely be able to use the FSA ID. And it'll look as though they're mutually exclusive. Just like if you have two kids, it'll recognize the differences there now. Julie will need her own FSA ID when she creates her own account. So that would be the only account creation that you would need. Yep. Any other questions about this before we dive into the scholarship world very quickly? Okay, Ms. Keys, are you ready you want to transition? I can go ahead and move in.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Judican, hey, I saw your question. Hold on one second. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I don't want to. No, Mr. Judican, she needs her own ID still. She may not submit tax information, but she still has to use this to submit which colleges she wants to send this information to. So regardless of if you are uploading your own financial information as a student or not, you still have to have your own unique FSA ID because there needs to be a student profile associated with every parent profile in order for the student to send that information to the colleges. Good question.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark, for your help with introducing us to the FAFSA, or really reacquainting us with it. And we're also excited to hear from you tonight about searching for scholarships and what that process looks like, because once we reach October 1st and the FAFSA application opens, we'll fill it out, and then we're wondering what the next step is. So what does that look like as far as scholarship searching goes?
Yeah, absolutely. So like we identified before, there's a few different ways to pay for college, and the ones I always encourage you to look at first are grants, things that don't have to be paid back, scholarships. Set yourself up to have as little out of pocket or repaid expense over your head when you first start your career as possible when you get into the workforce after graduating. So to do that, there again, the college scholarship search is unique. There are scholarships set up for thousands of different things. There are scholarships set up with certain employers. There are scholarships that are for certain regions. For instance, if you are a low-income family in Memphis and you want to go to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, there's a TriStar scholarship for people within a certain income bracket. If you are accepted to the University of Tennessee with nothing else other than being able to be eligible for the HOPE, you can get a full ride, right? if you fall into that income bracket. So things like that are extremely important to know. The problem there is that they're very nuanced, and there's two big differences, which there again, please refer back to our financing college discussion that we had before, because I dive into this a lot more. But basically you have internal, what we title internal scholarships and external scholarships. Internal scholarships are ones provided through specific schools that are unique to that school. Okay. Now, diving into that, those are either automatically considered upon your application, your general application for admission to the university, or they are ones you have to apply for separately. Okay. And just some rough examples of that are, if you apply to Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama, upon applying, you are automatically entered for the Crosstown Scholarship. Okay. And that can be anywhere up to $12,000 a year. However, there's another one called the Marion Davies that if you want to be eligible for that, you have to apply for that. Sometimes internal scholarships require nothing more than your general admissions application or your early decision application. Especially on the public university side, that's the case. But occasionally, internal scholarships require an additional essay or some other portion of your application that would not be required for just general admission or early admission, but they are required for that scholarship. So that is a great place to start, especially if you have a top school in mind. Okay. They typically do a very good job, especially with public institutions, of outlining what those are. Now, those are specific to the school. Those are internal scholarships. So like if you were to receive a Buchanan scholarship at Middle Tennessee State University, that is a full ride. That is for Middle Tennessee State University. You may not use that for Rhodes or Vanderbilt or University of Memphis. That is a school-specific scholarship, okay? To find those, you need to go to the school site for the schools that you are interested in applying for, especially those that, because of timing, are on the early admission trajectory for you, okay? If you're applying early to Middle Tennessee State University, you need to be working on the Buchanan application now, okay? If you are looking at a bunch of schools, and especially if you're looking at private schools that may not have enough private school internal scholarships to fully fund room, board, tuition, and other expenses, then what I strongly advise you doing is starting, and unfortunately this is a pretty manual process still, the process of identifying unique to you and your student external scholarships, okay? And these are the ones that most people think of when they hear the word scholarship, like, you know, the Coca-Cola scholarship, the ones that are provided typically through nonprofit organizations. Our team will be providing a scholarship to one kid at Crosstown in the first graduating class, so you should be applying to that. There will be a little bit more information coming to you guys pretty soon. But with those vary anywhere from like literally $150 all the way up to a full ride and the full cost of tuition, plus even a little bit more, okay? And those are very unique to what you're looking to do, okay? My brother went to Yale underneath the Quest Bridge, which is a first-generation low-income family scholarship for elite institutions, and he was able to use that to fully fund all the expenses associated with Yale. I didn't get that, so I had a little different look, okay? But that's an external scholarship, right? You can use that to go to Yale, but you can also use it to go to Princeton. You can use it to go to a lot of different schools. That is specific for first-generation college kids of low-income families, all right? There are scholarships out there that are specific to students who are interested in journalism, and then there are also student scholarships for ones who are for kids studying aeronautical engineering, okay? There are tons of different scholarships out there, and there are some good portal websites out there like scholarships.com that are basically query searches that have a pretty good amount of scholarships out there in terms of their database. But when you're identifying these, you need to think about your profile, what's unique to you and what you're looking to pursue if you know your intended field of study, and potentially any overlaps there. One most commonly overlooked thing is your parent's employer, okay? A lot of companies, even if they don't readily advertise it, have internal scholarships, and those can be huge and they can be very small. Like the propane company my dad worked for gave $500 to a kid who would write an essay about whatever, and I got that. That's $500 scholarship. But then there's also like if your parent works for AIG or any of their subsidiaries, you can apply for the scholarship that's a full ride to Vanderbilt if you live in Tennessee. So that's not something that they tell you about in your 401k and health benefits plan at AIG, but that is something that is out there. So I would definitely look at that, because you'd be surprised with how many different institutions have those. But the process generally looks like writing down a profile search, just like you do when you write your Common App. What are you wanting to tell the school about who you are? And then you begin the search, which is unfortunately fairly manual. If this is your first time going through this, what I always encourage people to do is look at it at 10x of what you need. And I'll explain that. So I do all the work. I look at what I'm going to get in scholarships through merit through the school. And I know that after all said and done, I still have 20 grand that I'm going to out of pocket to go to my school. All right. $20,000 a year. So for me to find $20,000 of scholarships would not be smart, because I'm not going to get all of those scholarships. So I like to say 10x. So I'm going to go now find $200,000 worth of scholarships and apply for $200,000. If that means applying for 8 or 15 or however many that might be, however it works out, that's what I'm going to be looking at, because my chances of getting any one of them is not 100%. Okay. If you get more than what you need, okay. But with most of those scholarships, there's going to be an application process. A lot of times you can use what you've already written for your personal statement and other things in terms of your supplemental essays. And it is definitely worth your time. Now, a lot of people are asking Ms. Keys about scholarships, and I understand that that's extremely important for a lot of people to finance college. Most colleges are going to require that you have a college acceptance. I'm sorry, most scholarships are going to require that you have a college acceptance before you start applying to third-party scholarships. So most scholarship opportunities are going to come after December 15th, which is the early decision, early action release deadline for most schools. So on your timeline, what you need to be doing as a student and as a parent between now and December 15th, along with applying, doing all the Common App stuff, getting your FAFSA out there, CSS, Idoc, all of that, is to start the search. All right. It is time consuming, and it does take a little energy and a little creativity. If you know that you are a first generation college student in Memphis, Tennessee, there may be a local Memphis, Tennessee first generation college student scholarship. There also might be one that's specific to what you want to study, which, say you want to study journalism. There are tons of scholarships out there for journalism. Okay. If you're looking to get into an underrepresented field of study, there are usually tons and tons. Okay. For me to go through all the scholarships, there's $1.7 billion worth of scholarships given out every year in America alone. Okay. So there's a lot of money out there, and a lot of students don't apply to anywhere near as much as they should. And if you've ever been at a high school graduation that announces scholarships, you'll usually see 1 or 2 kids who walk down the aisle 50 times to receive 15 different scholarships each. And then most kids never get off their seat, because most kids are not spending the time that they need to apply. The kids, if you talk to them every single time, they didn't have some magical formula. They just spent time researching it. Okay. It's kind of like the college search. There's 5,300 post-secondary institutions in America alone, between trade schools and colleges and 2-year institutions. You can't apply to all of them. You need to find the ones that are good fits for you. With these scholarships, it is time consuming, and I will be more than happy to help you guys. If you are like, look, I don't even know where to start. I know I need to apply to some scholarships, but I'm terrified about this. I didn't do this, and this is my oldest child. Then please email me, mark@brainsandbrawnllc.com. I've got my email in the chat. I will spend time with you. I will help you find scholarships. I will help you figure out how to apply to them. I will try my best to make them custom fit to your student needs, your background. There is no website that has every scholarship. There is no quick way of doing this, unfortunately. But granted, think of it this way. If you're applying to a scholarship that takes you 6 hours to apply for, and it's $60,000 and you get it, you just made $10,000 an hour. Okay. It's worth the time, but it's simple, but it's not easy. It takes time. All right. You need to really outline in this order who you are, what you're going to study, any unique things about you, then begin searching for each one of those. Okay. If you have a unique background, cultural, ethnic, religious, go look at that. If you have a unique intended field of study, or even not a unique intended field of study, go look at that. Okay. In general, though, I will tell you that the big ones that kids like to apply to, like see kids every year who are like, I applied to 2 scholarships that were both $100,000 each, you and everyone else. So those are usually super competitive. If you can find one that's very unique to you, you will find, I don't care who you are. I do this every year with all my one-on-one clients. And they always say the same thing. This scholarship sounds like it was written for me. Like there are going to be ones out there that are so specific that you would be blown away. I had a girl last year who's like, I don't think there's anything for me. We found one that was for kids who grew up in poor, socioeconomically deprived areas in coal country, where coal had been the main commodity in Kentucky for the last few years, who were looking to go study journalism at an elite institution. Okay, pretty specific, right? So yeah, it was not hard to get those. Not many people were applying for them, but it took time to find them. If you're really confused about how to do that, rather than just like spinning your wheels or getting frustrated, please reach out to me. I will help you walk through the process one-on-one. Also, you do have time between now and December 15th when you will actually have what you need, which is a college acceptance, hopefully, to begin applying for these. But between now and then, that's the time where you can get out ahead of everything, okay? So internal scholarships are pretty simple. You go to the school website and either you're automatically considered or you have to do an extra essay. For the ones that are not internal, the ones that are out there that are like unique to you, it takes time, it takes digging. The main scholarships that I like to use, Ms. Stockwell, quite honestly, I don't like using scholarship websites because they tend to only really have those gigantic ones that are really powerful. But there are a few, like I think it's scholarships.org or maybe it's scholarships.com that Ms. Keith, there's Niche has a bunch on there. And then there's plethoras of databases. I honestly just start Googling like scholarship for student of, you know, Hispanic descent in Mid-South to study journalism. You can start with that sort of stuff. In my opinion, that's better than going on to one of these like advanced search queries where you put in 6 different things and then you see just hundreds of them, because unfortunately some of those are outdated, and you'll see ones that like send you to a link that's no longer there. The scholarship might have existed in 2017 and they haven't updated their website, but the link's still there. And just from my, like with how much time I don't have, it's really not efficient for me. I'd rather search what I know about the kid to be true in Google, which in my opinion is like the best query, and it'll give me what I need. So if you want to do it that way, that's what I encourage. There are a few out there. You can just look at, I think scholarships.com or .org is probably the strongest in general. But there are still some issues with that. You just may have to peruse like 10 pages, you know, go to the like 10th page of the search and find some stuff there. And it also depends on how unique your request is. You know, if you're looking for something that is super unique, I think a Google search is probably the best. If you're looking for something that you think will be pretty straightforward, then something like a scholarships.com would be really quick. You get a lot of results, and then you can go through those once you see them all on one page. That's our general approach to scholarships. In general, start with internal, look at what you have there. After that, figure out what you need, supplement that with external, and then begin by outlining who you are and then search for those specific criteria. There's no like magical way of doing it, and there's no portal like Common App or Fafsa.gov that'll do it for you. If you have questions, schedule a meeting with me and I'll be more than happy to walk you through it.
All right. Thanks so much, Mark. Again, if you all need to reach out to Mark, his email is in the chat. I'll just say it aloud as well. It's mark@brainsandbrawnllc.com. And we've recorded this meeting, so if any of you need to go back and look at the notes or listen to this again, I'll have it available later on this week on our YouTube channel. But again, thank you all so much for being here tonight. Mark, thank you for your information and your wisdom and your experience with this. Yeah, I hope that you all have a fantastic evening, and we will see you very soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.